This is Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, in a beautiful location just west of Calgary. And what we have here is a very interesting car. This is a 2005 Maserati Coupe GT with a 4.2 liter Ferrari designed quad cam V8 engine, 390 horsepower, about 330 pound-feet of torque, 7,500 RPM redline, with a Cambio Corsa Ferrari F1 gearbox. So this car is significant in that it really put Maserati back on the map in North America. As you probably know, Maserati has a storied history, achieving big success on the Grand Prix circuits in the 50s and so on, with drivers like Juan Manuel Fangio and a 250F and so forth. And then we're synonymous with Italian GTs through the 50s and 60s. They lost their way, ran out of money, as most of these car companies do, and then kind of stumbled from very small volume, kind of niche cars, not that highly developed. They didn't really have a lot of capital. It kind of reached its low point with the B-Turbo in the 80s, which was a distinguished car for all the wrong reasons, mostly inconvenience, surprises, and thermal moments. So Maserati regrouped with something called a 3200 GT, which looked a lot like this with different rear taillights. And then Ferrari bought the company and became under the umbrella of the Fiat Group. And with that, they did a redesign of the car, and that started the Ferrari Maserati collaboration, which saw the heavily influenced and major parts of it came right from Ferrari, including the engine and the gearbox, and they built a brand new factory. And then this car then would have put Maserati back on the map in North America, and now Maserati, I think they announced in a press release that they wanted to do like 50,000 cars, and it was laughable at the time because I think they were doing about 10, but it looks like they're on their way to doing it. So now they've got a full range of cars and an SUV and so on, but this is where it started. And then so this car would have the architecture of the engine, the 4.2 liter, also would have been shared with a 430. There's a difference in the cranks. The 430 would have been tuned for more high-end power, so it had a flat plain crank, so it sounds completely different, almost kind of rude and unhappy and gruff, where the Maserati actually sounds a lot nicer. Some say the Maserati has the nicest sounding engine note of any car. And then that engine was also shared with the Alpha 8C as well. And some people say that also that car as well has the distinction of being like the best sounding car ever. So that's really what makes this thing special. And you just don't get this in modern cars anymore. You don't just get engines like that. With the Germans, you're lucky to get a sheet of plastic with a logo on it. I mean, look how beautiful this is turned out with the crackle finish. I mean, this finish is right out of a 250 Testarossa from the 50s. The red cam covers and so forth. It's just gorgeous. Maserati gets this light gold intake manifold and so on, but it's a beautiful engine. It's linear. It revs to 7,500 RPM. The 430 puts out more power because there's a flat plane crank, and it revs to, I think, 85, if I'm not mistaken. But this is tuned for more low end power. So it's just a gorgeous machine. So these cars would have all come into Ferrari of New Jersey. This is a Canadian market car sold in Canada. It would have come into Ferrari of New Jersey, Ferrari Maserati of New Jersey, Ferrari Maserati of America, and then into New Jersey, and then imported into Canada. That's how all the Ferraris and Maseratis came in. And then, of course, so they're all EPA compliant, and there are your stickers. And we have the color Grigio Palladio with the blue and gray interior. Forget the Italian names. So so it's an interesting car. It's a significant car. They didn't make that many of it. I mean, I'm sure they made more Ferrari 360s than they did Maserati Coupes. Have to check on those numbers. But and it's a gorgeous machine. It's a Grand Touring car, but it still has a heck of an engine. And what really surprised me about driving it was the suspension. Now this car has the optional skyhook suspension, and that would be adjustable dampers, or similar to what Porsche would call a PASM, where it changes the valving in the shocks via computer control. So it actually handles surprisingly well. I mean, you look at this engine, it looks a little far forward. You might think it would understeer, but actually it's very sharp on the nose. And then a great V8 soundtrack. Now, these cars are also like incredible value right at the moment. You know, they're bargain exotics. But this car is a little bit special, and the reason it is because it only has 5,600 kilometers on it, or maybe a little bit more now that I drive it out here to take photographs of it. That's 3,500 miles, and so it's a brand new Maserati. Now the story is I had a client who wanted to buy his and her Maseratis in '05. I helped them do that. There wasn't a Maserati dealership in Calgary at the time, so this came from Vancouver. So we got a Quattroporte and for him, and this was his wife's car. And you know, they have lots of cars and you know, aren't in Canada all year long, and so the cars never got driven, but they did get driven reasonably regularly. And you know, the car got serviced a couple of times. I don't have records for it, but it got serviced 2 times in its life, and then we just did with the first owner, and then I just did a service on it, and I took it to a guy who's restoring my V12 E-Type that I'm doing. And he checked all the fluids and, you know, measured condensation and did whatever he did, and he changed the oil, so none of the fluids had any problems with them, either the coolant or the brakes. We just left it alone. So you may want to take it to a Maserati dealer and get a major service done on it, but actually you don't have to. It's wearing the original tires, it has the original brakes, it's never been modified, it's never been hit, it's never been painted, nothing's ever happened to it. Nothing's even ever broken on it. It's never had any invasive work done to it. It's basically, well, 3,500 mile car. It's basically brand new. The P0s are a little bit of vibration. That said, though, with a couple hundred kilometers that I've put on, it's actually going away. Still, they're 15 years old, and I'm sure the ride and handling would improve. You know, with new tires. You can see the brakes cleaned up nicely. There, you can see there was a little line there where they sat, but it's cleaned up nice. We refinished 2 of the wheels because they had some marks on them. The other 2 we didn't. I'll show you the brakes in there. Now, this car, not only does it have, you know, incredibly low kilometers, but you know, it obviously wouldn't have been winter driven. I don't even think it went out when it was raining. When we put it up on the hoist, and we have some photographs of that, like, it looks brand new. The linkages look brand new. There isn't even any dust on the linkages on the underside of the car. Like, it doesn't look like it's ever been driven on a bad road. You know, it really is a new car. Now, to fault it, it would be kind of ridiculous in this condition. But just to differentiate, you know, from a brand new car, the tiniest speck, well, you know, I got one little rock chip there, and one little rock chip there, and it looks like it's just in the clear, but anyway, that's there. Okay, I can't find another one. The spoiler, you know, doesn't even look like it scraped the spoiler. Like most of these cars, at least even when they're brand new, you know, they'll contact the pavement, and I don't see any of that. Okay, so going in the car, well, I noticed, what did I notice? There's a couple little marks somewhere here. don't know if you can see that, but there are two little tiny marks there. And I noticed one little, where is it? Oh yeah, one little tiny mark there, okay? I noticed something on the front fender. It won't show up painted, but if I run my finger along the edge there, I think there's a tiny little dent right there. You can't actually really see it. I just caught it in the light and noticed it. Tiny little dent right there. Okay. Well, okay, so that's oh wait, there's one other thing. That got scuffed with something. Now you just rub some black paint in it and it'll go away, but it is there. Okay, so we have a couple tiny little things. I mean, it's hardly worth mentioning, but I will mention them. So differentiating it from, like, you know, the moment it left the factory. I mean, I've seen new cars come off the boat and they have stuff like this. Okay, so let's address maybe low kilometer car. You know, people are going to wonder, well, you know, how is it stored, and you know, are there any problems with it being ultra low kilometers? You know, seals that dry up, or brakes that stick, or linkages that seize up, and you know, those are all fuel that may gel, and those are all real concerns. I've experienced them myself. That said, Calgary is very dry. This has been in a climate controlled, I don't want to call it a garage. It's a kind of a cross between a man cave and a parkade. Climate controlled its whole life. The conditions that it was stored in were perfect, and there is no drying up of any of the weather seals. Everything is still supple and as new. Well, I noticed something else. Not sure what's going on with that. I'm not sure about that. It's the rubber around there. But anyway, the weather stripping is all supple. It doesn't leak. There's no like smell of oil on an exhaust manifold or something. None of the lights have ever gone on. You know, so it's not like, you know, it's had a bunch of warning lights on and it goes in the shop and they get the scanner and they cancel the lights and hope they don't come on again. Nothing's ever happened to the car. Nothing's ever broken with the car. No light has ever gone on with the car. There's been no problem with the car, and driving it, you know, 200-300 kilometers since then, nothing's come up either. Okay, so I had an MGB that had 183 kilometers come through my hands recently. It's on bad as well. It kind of got beat up in the auction from everybody telling me that it, you know, saying that for sure it would start leaking. It was mothballed in 1980. You know what? We replaced a wheel bearing because it was sitting. We changed the fluids and it drove like a brand new car and it didn't leak. It was absolutely fine. So if these cars are properly stored, at least in Calgary, you don't have those problems. You know, other cars, other cars in other environments will. I remember an article from Mike Sheehan in Sports Car Market talking about cars in Dubai from one of the royal families, and I guess he spent too many $1 billion on hand one-off Astons and Ferraris and got cut off, and they cut the bill off on his power, and the cars were left in this humid environment at 40 degrees and they were all destroyed. Like, they didn't have any mileage on them and the cars were destroyed. So it's possible to have a car with no mileage, 15 years old, and have it be destroyed, and it's also possible one to have that's perfectly preserved, and all of that is entirely dependent on the conditions that it's put in, and this one was put in good conditions, and there is nothing to suggest that there is any problems with the ultra low kilometers on the car. There's nothing to suggest that. So I know that's going to come up in the auction, but I would suggest that people don't have anything to worry about. If you were to buy the car, well, you know, the ride and handling would improve with new rubber. Actually, the flat spots kind of going away. When I had a CLK in this era with these tires, they'd flat spot after a week. And they go away really quickly, but they'd flat spot really quickly. So, you know, even the rubber, you know, you could still run. Although I'm sure, like I said, it would handle better. and maybe a bit less road noise with new rubber. Plus, tire technology has come a ways in 15 years. So with all that, it's a really great opportunity, I think, to have something that is a real bargain. I mean, even if you, obviously this car will go for a premium compared to others of its year because of the ultra low mileage, but even with, let's call it just for an example, I don't know what the premium would be, but let's just say it's a 50% premium because of the ultra low mileage. It's still a bargain. This was 160,000 Canadian dollars, and in the US the MSRP would have been around $100,000 on this car, and it's brand new. I mean, it's just a fantastic value. Now, what keeps the value down on these cars is, of course, the F1 gearboxes, which is one of the first generations of the automated manual gearboxes. Now, they call it a Cambio Corsa in Maserati. It's an F1 gearbox with Ferrari. And these gearboxes, I mean, this came out in the mid 90s in the Ferrari F1 car, and I remember that it had a V12 engine that only had a 1500 RPM rev range, and they needed a gear 7 speeds to keep the car in the correct rev range, and the drivers couldn't shift fast enough, so they came out with a semi-automatic gearbox for the F1 car so that the driver could shift the gearbox fast enough to keep it in this very, very small range. And that's when it came out. It made its way to the road cars with the Ferrari, and BMW had a version, and Volkswagen as well. And Porsche picked it up with a PDK, which is a different gearbox. It's double clutch. But the first ones at the time, you know, I was selling Ferraris when they came out, and if you can believe it, you know, I had guys wanting to buy manuals or manual gearboxes, and we were saying, don't do it. You know, the F1 gearbox is way better. Just don't get a manual. Nobody wants a manual. It's a crappy gearbox. Now, of course, everybody wants manuals, and the gearboxes now have come a long way. Like a PDK, if you compare it to this, it's just absolutely no comparison. That said, you know, you can still drive around it, and it's fine. You just, you know, it's just a car that you probably just don't want to, I don't want to gender profile her, you probably just don't want to give it to your wife to like commute in traffic and so on, because, you know, if you drive it in auto mode, it's a little bit sluggish, and, you know, if you're just inching around, I mean, you'll be slipping the clutch a lot, then you have to replace the clutch, and then, you know, that's a, you know, $5,000 bill or whatever it is, okay? So that's probably not what you want to use the car for. But if it goes to an enthusiast who understands when the clutch is slipping and when it's not slipping, and to, you know, put the car in neutral at stoplights and so on, and to just manage it, it's actually fine. And then, you know, it's like I said, in the manual or the automatic mode, it's not too great. But once you get acclimatized to it, lifting off during your shifts and timing your application of throttle and so forth, you drive around it, and it actually just adds engagement to the car. And you know, now this is a classic, and it's a period piece, and, you know, like if you have a Jag with a Moss gearbox, well, you're gonna drive around that gearbox as well. And if you have a early Porsche 911, I mean, those gearboxes are a little bit, you know, they're a little bit vague, and you drive around that, and this is part of the charm of the car. So I don't think that you know, it's necessarily fair what it does to the value of the car because of the F1. Yeah, you can criticize it if you compare it to today's technology, but in period, it worked pretty well, actually. Okay, so as long as you are prepared to sort of invest a little bit of time and practice and so on, it's actually quite a satisfying machine. So you put it all together, and then you've got a Ferrari designed coupe with lots of power, 7,500 RPM redline. You got a great Italian exhaust note. You have performance of 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, and, you know, 175 miles an hour. Quad cam, 4.2 liter V8 engine, racing 6-speed gearbox, full leather interior, leather dash, leather headliner. You know, something that's special and unusual, and, you know, you can take it out to, you know, the Cars and Coffee and go out with the Ferrari guys and the Maserati guys and have kind of a special car. And you can also take your wife out for dinner in it, and it's a nice cruiser, and go on a nice road trip. And you can do all of that for an amount of money that would just get you like a beat up old Porsche 911 that needs lots of work. And this is a brand new car. So there's a lot of value in this car, and it is a beautiful thing, and I'm sure it'll make somebody very happy. Okay, so that's my summary of the 2005 Maserati 4200 Coupe Cambio Corsa that we have in Calgary, Alberta here. I'm sure it's well, it'd be difficult to replace this car. Find another one with 3,500 miles. Okay, thank you very much.